There are things Padre Pio witnessed about purgatory during Holy Week that the Church recorded, that witnesses confirmed, and that most Christians have never been told. A young Capuchin friar found Padre Pio kneeling motionless in his cell in the early hours of Good Friday 1922, in San Giovanni Rotondo. The cell was dark. The door had been left slightly open. The friar had come to call him for lauds, the pre-dawn prayer that began the day. He stopped at the threshold. Padre Pio was not asleep. He was not in quiet meditation. His body was completely rigid. His face was turned upward. His lips moved without sound. And his hands, both of them, were pressed flat against the stone floor, as if he were holding something down, or holding something back. The friar watched for several minutes before retreating without a word. He described what he had seen to two other brothers that same morning. All three of them noted the same detail independently, that the temperature inside that cell, even with the door open, was noticeably colder than the corridor outside. When Padre Pio emerged for Mass that morning, he said nothing about what had happened. He never explained it directly. But in the weeks that followed, in the confessional and in private conversations with his spiritual director, fragments of what he had witnessed that night began to surface. What he described about purgatory, about what happens to souls there during the days between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, about who goes there and why, and about what the living can still do for them, is a revelation that changes the way a person understands everything about this season. And it begins with something most people have never once considered. But what Padre Pio witnessed in that cell on Good Friday was not simply a vision of suffering souls. It was about something far more specific and far more urgent than a general glimpse of the afterlife. A truth about what Holy Week means for the dead that the living almost never stop to consider, and that changes the weight of every prayer prayed during these days. But to understand what Padre Pio saw, you first need to understand something about his relationship with the souls in purgatory. Something that began long before that Good Friday night and that shaped everything he believed about this season. This is not a detour. It is the key without which what he witnessed makes only partial sense. And that is exactly what will be shown right now. From the earliest years of his priesthood, Padre Pio spoke of the souls in purgatory not as a theological concept, but as a present reality. They came to him, not in dreams, not in vague spiritual impressions. They appeared to him in his cell, in the corridors of the friary, sometimes in the confessional itself. Souls who had died and were undergoing purification, who came seeking what only the prayers of the living could provide. This is documented. The accounts are preserved in letters written by Padre Pio himself, in testimonies collected by his superiors, and in the formal depositions gathered during the Vatican's investigation of his cause for canonization. These were not the reports of excitable followers looking for miracles. They were the sober, reluctant admissions of a man who found these encounters as exhausting as they were frequent. He described souls appearing to him scorched, incomplete, suspended between what they had been in life and what they were not yet ready to become in eternity. He described the specific weight of their suffering, not physical in the way human pain is physical, but a longing so acute and so total that no earthly comparison could adequately capture it. A longing for God that was simultaneously the most beautiful and the most agonizing thing a soul could experience. Multiple witnesses confirmed that Padre Pio would sometimes stop mid-conversation, mid-meal, mid-prayer, and simply go silent. Those who knew him well understood what it meant. Someone had arrived. Someone who needed intercession. Someone who could not wait. His spiritual director, Father Agostino of San Marco in Lamis, recorded in his personal journals that Padre Pio once described the souls in purgatory as the most neglected reality in the Christian life, not because people disbelieved in them, because people forgot about them. They were out of sight. And what is out of sight, he said, is almost always out of prayer. It is precisely because of this, because of decades of direct, documented, witnessed contact with the souls undergoing purification, that what Padre Pio saw during Holy Week carries a weight that no sermon on the afterlife can replicate. He was not theorizing, he was reporting. And now, exactly what he saw will be revealed. The revelation that Padre Pio returned to, especially in his conversations during Holy Week, was this: purgatory is not static. It is not a fixed condition that souls enter and endure uniformly until their purification is complete. It moves, it responds. It is affected by what happens in the living world in ways that most Christians have never been taught to consider. This may sound like a comforting idea at first, the notion that the prayers of the living reach the dead and do something real. But what Padre Pio understood about this went far deeper than comfort. He saw it not as a general spiritual principle, but as a specific, urgent, and largely ignored responsibility that the living carry toward those who can no longer help themselves. He described Holy Week in particular as a season of extraordinary movement in purgatory, not because the rules change, but because the weight of what is being commemorated on earth, the passion, the death, and the resurrection of Christ, reverberates through every dimension of existence that Christ's sacrifice touches. And purgatory, he insisted, is one of those dimensions. He once said to his spiritual director, "During these days, the distance between the living and the dead is thinner than at any other time of the year. The cross reaches further during Holy Week than the prayers of most Christians ever think to follow it." That single statement carries more weight than it first appears. Because what it implies is not merely that prayer during Holy Week is more powerful. It implies that silence during Holy Week, the failure to pray for the dead, the failure to offer the sufferings of this season for the souls in purgatory, is a specific and costly form of neglect that most Christians commit every year without realizing it. And now, exactly what Padre Pio saw, and what it means for the living today, will be shown. One of the first things Padre Pio made clear about what he witnessed was that purgatory is not populated by strangers. The souls he encountered were not abstract, unnamed figures from some distant spiritual realm. They were people, specific people, people who had lived ordinary lives, who had loved and failed and repented and died, and who were now suspended in a process of purification that was both necessary and painful. Many of them, he said, were people whose families on earth had stopped praying for them, not out of cruelty, but out of the simple assumption that enough time had passed, that surely they must be in heaven by now, that the obligation had somehow expired. He was direct about this. There is no expiration on the debt of prayer owed to the dead. A soul in purgatory does not stop needing intercession because the living have moved on. The need continues until the purification is complete. And the living, he said, have far more power to shorten that process than they have ever been told. A second thing Padre Pio revealed was that certain sins create longer and more intense purification than others, not in a mechanical or arbitrary way, but in proportion to the damage those sins caused, to other souls, to relationships, to the fabric of trust and love that holds human communities together. Sins of pride that were never truly surrendered. Wounds inflicted on others that were never repaired. Grudges carried to the grave that poisoned years of relationship. These, he said, do not simply dissolve at the moment of death because the soul was ultimately saved. They must be purified. And the process of purifying them is real, and it is costly, and it is something the living can assist with through prayer, sacrifice, and the offering of their own sufferings. He connected this directly to Holy Week. The suffering of Christ during these days, he said, is not merely a historical event to be commemorated. It is an active, present reality that the living can unite their own sufferings to, and direct, specifically and intentionally, toward the souls who need it most. A third revelation was about what the souls in purgatory experienced during Holy Week specifically. Padre Pio described it as a season of intensified longing. Not more pain exactly, but a deeper awareness of what awaits them, a closer proximity to the mercy that is completing its work in them. He said that souls in purgatory experience the passion of Christ, not as observers, but as participants. That the weight of these days reaches them in a way that accelerates their purification in proportion to the prayers being offered for them on earth. This is not a minor detail. It means that the prayers offered for the dead during Holy Week carry a specific and heightened efficacy that prayers offered at other times of the year do not carry in the same way. And it means that a Christian who passes through Holy Week praying only for the living, never lifting a thought or a sacrifice toward the souls in purgatory, is leaving an extraordinary grace unclaimed and an extraordinary need unmet. A fourth thing Padre Pio revealed was about the connection between our own unconfessed sins and the souls we neglect. He saw a pattern in the confessional that he found deeply significant. The people who were most resistant to praying for the dead were often the same people who were most resistant to examining their own interior lives honestly. As if the discomfort of confronting what lies beyond death, even for others, was too close to the discomfort of confronting what lies unresolved within oneself. He did not say this to accuse. He said it to illuminate. Because the remedy, he believed, was the same in both cases. Honesty, surrender. The willingness to bring what is hidden into the light, whether it is a sin that has never been confessed or a soul that has never been prayed for. He would say, "During these days, pray for the dead as you would want the living to pray for you. Offer your difficulties, your physical suffering, your frustrations, your sleepless nights, offer them deliberately, specifically, for the souls in purgatory. And trust that what you send into that dimension of God's mercy does not return empty." He promised that a person who prayed faithfully for the souls in purgatory during Holy Week would experience something in their own spiritual life, a softening, a clarity, a sense of connection to the full reality of what Christ's death and resurrection actually accomplished, that no amount of external religious observance could produce on its own. And now, what changes for the person who takes this seriously will be shown. That young Capuchin friar who found Padre Pio kneeling on the cold stone floor of his cell in the early hours of Good Friday, he never forgot what he had seen. He spoke of it decades later, in his own old age, with the same quiet certainty he had carried since that morning. He said that what struck him most was not the stillness of Padre Pio's body or the coldness of the room. It was the expression on his face. He described it as the face of someone who was fully present in two places at once. Someone whose body was in that cell and whose soul was somewhere else entirely, somewhere heavy and real and desperately in need of what he was bringing to it. Padre Pio himself lived this until the end. Every Mass he celebrated, he offered for the souls in purgatory. Every suffering he endured, and they were many and they were severe, he directed deliberately toward those who could not help themselves. He did not treat the dead as the past. He treated them as the present, as neighbors, as family, as souls whose need was as real and as urgent as anything happening in the visible world. The question this revelation leaves is simple, and it is uncomfortable. When you pass through Holy Week this year, through Good Friday, through Holy Saturday, through Easter Sunday, will you remember that the cross Christ carried reaches further than the living? That there are souls suspended in purification right now who have no one left on earth to pray for them? That the distance between your prayer and their need is thinner during these days than at any other time of the year? The question is not whether you believe in purgatory. The question is what you will do with these days while you still have them to give. If this video helped you see something about this season that you had never considered before, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Because teachings like this one need to reach every soul that still has time to act, and your participation is what makes that possible.